Good evening and welcome to Access Iowa City, a program about the independent living and rehabilitation movements in Southeast Iowa. Access Iowa City is brought to you by a generous contribution from the Noon Pilots Club of Johnson County in collaborations between the Extended Dream Foundation, Access to Independence, and the Center for Disabilities and Development, as well as the hard work from all the folks here at Public Access Television Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham, President of the Board of Directors of Access to Independence, Vice Chair of the Johnson County Mental Health Disability Services Planning Council, and an individual who's lived with a significant disability for over 41 years. This evening we're bringing you our annual pre-ADA celebration show with my co-host Keith Ruff and Nicole Palmer from the Children's Museum, who has served on the planning committee for this year's celebration. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
This year's celebration will be Saturday, July 28th at the Coral Ridge Mall, and we'll start off the day at 10 o'clock in the theater of the Children's Museum with some opening remarks from Senator Bob Dvorsky, followed by the movie A Friend in Need, which is about Bill Sackett, who was a well-known individual with a disability who lived in Iowa City for a number of years, but who originally lived 37 years of his life in a state institution in Minnesota. We'll then have an assistive technology demonstration by Warren Larson from the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. Following that, we'll move on to the food court area of the mall, where we'll have a welcoming and a keynote address, followed by poetry readings by some of the winners of this year's Disability Poetry Contest. And we'll then move back to the Children's Museum for a roundtable with some families who receive services with the ARC of Southeastern Iowa. We'll have our presentation of the Citizen of the Year with John Bacon, and then we'll close with Gail Moat doing a presentation, and then we will adjourn to the Children's Museum, which will be open to the public at no cost. So this year we've had folks from several organizations, as well as the people from Access to Independence, working together on the planning committee. We've had folks from NAMI, from the ARC of Southeastern Iowa, and as I mentioned, Nicole from the Children's Museum. This is the second year that the Children's Museum has had significant involvement with the ADA celebration and has opened up their building for us for both tours and such. And we're going to let Nicole talk a little about the Children's Museum for everyone now.
Yeah, we're very excited to be a part of this year's ADA celebration, and just excited to have been asked to be a part of it. As Terry mentioned, last year went really, really well. This year we expect to be bigger and better. We are going to be open for free to those who are participating in the ADA celebration. So isn't that right? They'll have bands that'll be given out during the celebration. For those of you who haven't been down to visit the museum, we definitely welcome you. If for families that want to come play in the museum, just check in, make sure you have your band, and you can get in for free. If there's adults that just want tours, we'd be happy to give free tours at any time. So yeah, very excited to be a part of it.
Nicole, maybe you can kind of briefly describe what the museum has done to make it so accessible.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Absolutely. Well, we have had representatives from Access to Independence to come in and kind of give us an audit and give us recommendations on things that we can that we can continue to improve on. Of course, we have an elevator. We have 2 floors of interactive exhibits, and of course the elevator makes the top floor accessible to everyone. We've worked really hard to add in different languages, and if someone needs help, needs a tour or a guide through the museum, we can always do that as well. So we kind of continue to improve. We have an inclusion committee, which includes members from the city that kind of help us continue to improve, and we always welcome feedback back. We want to make sure we're accessible to all families. So, yeah.
Great. And this will be the 23rd anniversary of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I was fortunate that our Senator Tom Harkin was the driving force behind the writing and the introduction of the ADA, and it has continued through the years to be a great supporter of disability rights, which, you know, the ADA affects basically every segment of life for persons with disabilities.
And the number one reason why his brother was born, he's a deaf or became deaf. And Tom was very aware of the need for some kind of legislation that would cover all disabilities.
Mm-hmm. And I believe, in hearing the senator speak a number of times, he had a nephew that had served in Vietnam and received a significant injury, and that was a secondary reason for him to be involved in the ADA and getting the legislation passed.
Just living in our own community, I've noticed more and more disabled people are on the campus of the college ever since the bill was passed.
Sure. And the landscape has certainly changed over the last 23 years since the introduction of the ADA in obvious ways, where there's curb cuts and ramps and elevators and automatic door openers and, you know, wider doorways and that kind of thing that everybody sees and most everybody uses. I mean, when the ADA was first proposed, there was an incredible pushback from business and chambers of commerce and lots of groups that were saying, oh, you know, there's no way we can have this passed, that it will bankrupt everybody, you know, automatically everybody's going to have to tear down buildings and build new things. And that was, you know, it's never been true. When the ADA was passed, it said that from this point forward, all new construction would follow these standards, and that if a business did a significant remodeling, they would then put in the standards that they were able to. There was never an intent for businesses to have to redo everything they were doing. It was the same way with the employment-related issues. Oh, everybody's now going to have to go out and hire people with disabilities, and, you know, you'll have all these tokens in there to meet this quota and that quota. And again, that was never what it said. What the ADA said was, you need to interview qualified individuals, and that you only need to hire individuals who are qualified to do a job. It was never intended that, you know, you were automatically going to have to hire somebody to meet your quota of 6 disabled individuals. You know, That's not what folks with disabilities want. All we wanted was the opportunity to have, or still want, is the opportunity for a level playing field so that we can at least have an opportunity to interview for the job. Now, virtually nobody with disability expects that if they don't meet the qualifications, they're going to be hired. You know, that's just a fact of life. And that's all the ADA was intended to do, was to give everybody an equal opportunity.
And I think business forgot the idea that our money was just as green as anyone else's. And if we could get in there establishment, we could spend that money.
Well, and that's certainly the key in that, Keith. And I don't know whether it's they forgot so much as until they made themselves accessible, they didn't know we were around.
Yeah.
You know, because folks with disabilities back before the ADA went to school in their own little segregated school, rode back and forth to school on their own segregated little bus, you know. The infamous, did you ride the big bus or the little bus to school?
I had to ride 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, 2 hours there, 2 hours back.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is one place where the Children's Museum can come into play and help. If you start kids early and they're around all types of people, and then there's less discrimination, then they're used to being around and being exposed to all different types of people. And
Well, yeah, and you're so right on the money there. I've got 20-some nieces, nephews, great nieces, nephews, whatever. None of them have known me any other way than I am now. You know, and I didn't use a power chair for the first 20, 30 years of my disability. So, you know, back then when I used the push chair with the little knobs on it, you know, my nieces and nephews just saw my chair as kind of another toy.
Yeah.
That was how they first figured out how to stand up, because it was a whole lot easier hanging on to the push knobs on Uncle Terry's chair than it was trying to grab hold of a couch or whatever. They found out very quickly that if they stepped on this knob and then that knob, suddenly they were in my lap. And you know, their mothers would come out and want to know how I had gotten them in my lap, and said they got there themselves.
Right.
No, they can't. But because of that, you know, they never saw it as a big deal.
Right.
And I never really preached accessibility to them, which, you know, for a long time wouldn't have done any good, because, you know, the ADA didn't exist. But because we did things together, as they got old enough to have activities and wanted me to go, they could tell me where the funny angled sidewalk was.
That's really cool.
Or tell me where the doors that open by themselves were, or where the big button that you hit for a door to open, or where the door that had the lever action handle was, to go to whatever they wanted me to be at. You know, this was nothing that was a big deal. This was just how, if you wanted Uncle Terry to be there, those were how you got in.
Nicole, I really concur with you about children, because the more we educate children today, we'll have more understanding adults tomorrow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and I'm sure, Keith, you run into all the time too. Little kids are curious.
Yes.
They don't ask questions because they're trying to be nasty.
No.
They want an answer.
They're
You know,
very honest.
yeah. Gee, mister, why are you in that chair? You know, why? And so long as you can give them an answer, they really don't care what it is.
No.
But they've gotten an answer. They don't have to understand it. One of my stepkids one day came up and asked me what was wrong that I couldn't walk. And I said, well, I broke my neck. And she kind of looked at my neck, said, no, it's inside and you can't see it. Well, a half hour later, my wife came home and she proudly marched up to her and pointed to me and said, he can't walk because he broke his neck inside, and spun around and walked off, so proud that she had the answer. She had explained to everybody what was going on, and that was it.
I don't mind explaining to kids.
No.
The only thing I do mind is when the parents try to interfere and they don't bother that man. He doesn't feel well. If I didn't feel well, what would I be doing there
Yeah.
in the first place?
Well, or even if they don't have to say doesn't feel well, but the don't bother the man, but they
Yeah.
say it in a voice that you suddenly see this change come over the child's face because
Exactly.
it's in that there's something wrong voice. And from then on, you've lost them
Yeah.
Right.
because their parents have somehow indicated there's something wrong with the person who uses a chair or uses crutches or uses a cane or a seeing eye dog, whatever. Up until that point, when somebody in a position of authority implies there's something going on, they're perfectly content to talk to you, to watch as you're getting in and out of a van with the lift. Oh, Dad, can we get one of those? Can we get one of those? And they love doing that. Oh, here, can we open this door?
Play with the automatic door openers, yeah.
It's just fine.
And what is unfortunate, and I think all three of us will agree, that if we don't get the kids today, we have a lot of uneducated adults tomorrow.
Sure.
Right. Well, the mission of the Children's Museum is to inspire kids to imagine, create, discover, and explore through the power of play. And this, listening to you two talk, it strikes me as, like, so often parents hinder kids in their play even. No, go do this. Instead, you should just let kids explore on their own and come up to Keith and say, "Hey, Mister, what's going on?" Instead of, don't bother him. That's how kids grow and explore and develop.
Especially today with so much exposure. I don't know why adults keep doing that.
Right.
Well, and one of my nieces assumed that everybody else in a wheelchair somehow knew Uncle Terry and that I knew them. And my sister would talk about times when they were at a mall and they'd look down at the end of the mall and she'd see somebody in a wheelchair and she'd take off at a run. And by the time my sister caught up with her, she was at the person chatting their head off, and they'd look at her and say, "The only thing I've understood so far is Uncle Terry." And my sister would have to explain the thing, but they just didn't think that there was anything wrong with that. And as a result, a couple of them are now paraprofessionals and enjoy what they're doing. One of them, from early on in middle school, or I guess even before middle school, had a girl with a disability in her class, I guess, and she would stay inside at recess with this girl so she had something to do. And the teacher called my sister one time to tell her what a wonderful daughter she had, because this, and my sister's comment was, it's not the first disabled person she's ever been around. But, that's where you lose kids. Kids aren't born to discriminate against people with disabilities, people of color, whatever. It's not until someone else tells them that they suddenly pick that up.
Puts the
Otherwise,
idea in their head.
they're perfectly content. Or until, unfortunately, junior high hits and there's there's more activities that kids get involved in, and so their counterparts with disabilities aren't physically able to
Right.
participate in as many of those things, and that's where, you know, the turn kind of stops. But at least because of the ADA, you know, kids are in school together and have that chance to mingle and are able to participate in all the different programs.
And we're very fortunate, Nicole and Terry, to be in a college community.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of these kids come from the rural areas and they might not have been acquainted with anyone having a disability. So it's a good learning experience just to be here.
Well, and other things we can look around us and see, you know, lots of television shows and movies and that kind of stuff now feature individuals with disabilities in some pretty prominent roles.
Yeah.
And, you know, growing up, the only show that I really can remember that had somebody with a disability was Ironside.
Yeah, all very nice.
Yeah. But, you know, it's just a matter of doing that, you know, so that, you know, the buildings, you know, public services, you know, folks can't be denied any of the services that they need. All the things that have to be accessible.
And just walking through an airport nowadays, you realize how far we've come because there's a lot more wheelchairs
Sure.
traveling now than ever before.
Well, and I mean, if we go back to the things that we take pretty much as second nature now that weren't before the ADA. Public buses didn't have lifts on them. There were a few paratransit systems, or paratransit being essentially a system specifically for individuals with disabilities that's a door-to-door system instead of going to a bus stop. You know, you didn't see as many people flying, as you said.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't see people at parks and swimming pools or movies, you know, unless you wanted to sit in the front row and watch a movie like this, you know. And I watched more than a few of them that way if you really want to. You know, there were just so many things. Couldn't get into restaurants.
And today's buses are more technology friendly. They don't have lifts anymore because they're even with the curve. So that's how far we've come in a very short time.
It has been. But how long we have to go.
Oh yes.
This year, March 15th of this year, the final two pieces of the ADA were supposed to have gone into effect. That being that hotels and motels were supposed to have accessible swimming pools if they had them. Unfortunately, the pushback from the National Association was so strong that that's been delayed until January of next year. Because my goodness, you know, 23 years, you know, how could they ever get something done then?
Yeah.
You know, some of their members have been on record as saying they think that's a nuisance. As Keith and I have said many times, a law is only as good as the people it's intended for make it be.
Amen to that.
Well, one of the problems is we need help from other folks. If you're traveling, if you're making a reservation for a hotel or a motel, please ask if they have a pool. If they say they don't have a pool, or they do have a pool, ask if it's accessible. If it's not accessible, please tell them you don't stay at hotels or motels that don't have an accessible pool. The second is accessible service stations to be able to pump gas. That requires that there's signage that explains to people when there's 2 or more employees working so that the gas can be pumped, how to contact them, whether there's a button to push, whether you're supposed to honk, whatever you're supposed to do. That still is not being utilized the way it's supposed to be. When you stop at a service station, if they don't have a location like that, please move on to another one. In Iowa, we know that the Hy-Vees are accessible. We need your help in this stuff.
And as adults out there, whatever you do, don't always assume something. Come up to us and ask. Don't assume, because by you assuming, we're always going to be in the dark, because people don't quite know what's going on. All you gotta do is ask, and we'll tell you.
Again, we welcome you to join us at Coral Ridge Mall at 10 o'clock Saturday, July 28th. We think you'll have a wonderful time and a very informational day. We want to thank Nicole for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
My partner Keith.
Yeah.
We'll see you again soon.
Take care, everybody. Stay cool.